Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. Usually crossovers will have some kind of similarity or connective thread between their interacting characters, Batman and Daredevil being urban protectors, Hulk and Superman as immense powerhouses. Maybe you'll get teams like Teenage Misfits, Gen 13, and Generation X. But in today's review, the combination has to be read to be believed. I'm taking issue with Unholy Union, which sees the Darkness and Witchblade cross paths with not one, but 3 Marvel superheroes. But for the sake of context, let's get a little backstory, which the comic provides. In the last 3 pages after the story is concluded, you may know that Detective Sarah Pizzini is the latest in a long line of bearers of the Witchblade. Super long, like prehistory long. Who knew that Captain Caveman had competition in his own era? For years, she struggled to control its more destructive attributes, and eventually learned the seemingly sentient artifact was the spawn of 2 universal forces, the Angelus, embodiment of light, and the Darkness, which is kind of self-explanatory. Specifically, it's the male offspring of the 2. Is that the reason why it always removes the bearer's clothes and covers certain portions of their body? Eventually, Sarah found out she was pregnant, despite the fact she hadn't been intimate with anyone in over a year. Regardless, this was her chance at a family, which she figured wasn't gonna happen, so she passed the Witchblade over to Danielle Baptiste, a dancer that just so happened to be the daughter of Sarah's police captain. Though, of course, exposition implies maybe it wasn't happenstance. There's some other stuff, like Sarah's professional partner/boyfriend, the holy warrior Magdalena, but they don't appear in the story, so we'll be overlooking that for now. With all that out of the way, let's see if this comic makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. The cover has a lot going on. Hulk smashing the ground, old Jackie Estacado, possibly sicking those weird snake creatures on him. There's also Ghost Rider, who knew a skull could scowl. And right above Dr. Strange's Eye of Agamotto is a very pregnant Sarah Pizzini. So it looks like a usual Thursday night happy hour at Fuddruckers. It does seem a tad misleading, given that she's all witch-bladed up, but moving on. Written by Ron Mars, with art by Michael Broussard, Rob Hunter, Rick Basaldua, Joe Weems, and Larry Molinar, the credits page gives us some information on the 2 non-Marvel players. Specifically how Jackie's become a full-fledged mob boss, and it turns out the Witchblade's purpose for being is to maintain a balance between light and dark. Rumblings of a growing conflict between the Darkness and the Angelus have not gone unnoticed. Yeah, their neighbors keep calling the police whenever they start arguing too loudly. Even mysterious cosmic forces mistakenly thought bringing a kid into their dysfunctional relationship would automatically make things better. We begin with the Angelus, who currently does not have a host, being observed in a crystal ball by Dr. Strange, sensing a disturbance in the Force, an imbalance that could lead to a great conflict. But more than that remains hidden. Ever since he got into Gravity Falls, Steven tries to find hints and Easter eggs in everything he watches. That's why no one invites him to watch parties anymore. He tells Wong that since he's not omniscient, he can't get a clear picture of what these great forces are up to, but does expect mortals to be caught in the chaos. Meanwhile, Jackie Estacado is in a restaurant with his buddy Butch, celebrating his recent court victory in his favor. This time, Jackie really was innocent, but credits his attorney, Matt Murdock, for somehow knowing the mobster was being honest. He had a lot on his plate, too. He was also representing some teenager that allegedly used drones to murder Mysterio, but heck if I can remember what that kid's name was. Matt even looked him in the eye and told Jackie to stay out of trouble. Don't know if he always risks tipping his superpowered hand, or radar in this case, but there you are. Anyway, by apparent coincidence, Sarah and Danielle enter, and Estacado, of course, cracks that the detective has put on a few pounds, and says he's jealous of whoever managed to get her pregnant. I've mentioned before that I'm not a big follower of this character. I've only read a few stories with him, and I'm sure there's more to him than what's presented here. But I'd very much like to punch him in his creepy face right now. Sarah leaves, saying that regardless of how Estacado's shyster lawyer eked out this win, his life of crime will catch up to him, and he should consider if he wants to spend the rest of his life waiting for the other shoe to inevitably drop. As they pass the bar, she then tells Danielle that Jackie is one of the bad guys, but not a bad man, for as much sense as that makes.
you are bad guy, but this does not mean you're bad guy.
Sarah hears something amiss, despite the usual noise you'd get from a busy restaurant, only for Ghostwriter to crash through the window on a 2-page spread. And no surprise, he's here for Jackie. If being an arrogant tool is grounds for the penance stare, I got a list of people to go after him, dude. Estacado tells Butch to get Sarah and her friend to safety, breaks a light bulb with his bare hands, ouch, and transforms into the darkness, with his darkling minions instantly at his side. Declaring that no one escapes him, the writer intends to make the mob boss pay for his crime, even if the law didn't convict him. While they start tearing it up, Butch leads the ladies out, only to stumble across a man in distress, someone we casually saw a few pages ago, muttering that he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I just wanted a drink. Ugh, that's the last time I tell a bartender to surprise me. A pineapple and garlic martini was not a good idea. No, it's Bruce Banner, who, of course, hulks out from the surrounding fracas and busts through a wall, seemingly towards Jackie and the rider.
Leave Hulk alone! Hulk come here for ambiance and you totally killing the feng shui!
He knocks them both out of the building, and Dark Boy recalls their own crossover, asking if the big guy remembers him.
Hulk remembers you. Hulk remembers he doesn't like you!
Once again, I'm on the same page as a raging asocial recluse with anger issues. That's probably not a bad sign or anything, right? Right? The Witchblade frees Danielle from Butch's grip, and Sarah tells him to let her go, since she probably knows what she's doing. Before Big Green can make Jackie's face into a mystically enhanced pancake, he's stopped by a blast from Danny, who declares ownership of the Witchblade. Hulk recovers, intent on hurting the girl back, and Ghostwriter is back on his bike, still eyeing Jackie. He lassos his chain around the gangster's neck and starts dragging him against pavement, while Hulk decides to play catch with Danielle, using a nearby sedan. I think a compact would have been more sporting, but that's just me. As Hulk gets annoyed by Danielle's insistence on not getting crushed, instead shredding the car, Jackie stops himself, pulling the rider off his bike and unleashing the Darklings. On Hulk, one can assume to aid Danny. Also, I guess the Darklings can shapeshift into people Hulk knows, like Wolverine and Abomination, though I'm not sure why. If it's a psychological thing, it does not seem to be working, because he's more irritated than fazed as he tosses the new Witchblade aside and changes targets, while literally squashing one of them into goo. There's a reason Hulk's not allowed at the petting zoo. Because he kept giving the goats chocolate when the owners told him not to. What were you thinking? The big guy then attempts to do the same to Jackie, only to be suspended mid-smash by Dr. Strange. He's removed both Hulk and Ghosty from the time stream, saying that while they have been his allies, he can't let them interfere in Estacado's affairs. He magically sends the two elsewhere, saying they'll have little recall of the night's events and shouldn't come after him again. Teleport 2 superheroes and call me in the morning. Doctor's orders. For now, Strange gives a grim and ominous warning of the conflict ahead for both Estacado and the Witchblade, a war against much stronger forces. He can't discern the nature of the conflict and can do little more than wish them well, before disappearing. Jackie and Danny are left weirded out, unsure what to make of all that, but we'll probably find out sooner rather than later. The comic ends on a character from the Cyberforce named Karin, maybe? Complaining about having to repair a large ship, just because she's faster at it than anyone else, while being watched by the Angelus entity. A corner tag indicates that events continue from here in Firstborn #1. So that was Unholy Union, and it wasn't bad, but it largely involved characters I care little to nothing about, and didn't exactly get me amped for whatever event they were clearly setting up. Let me get to the art first. I thought it was mostly fine, with good coloring and details, but sometimes there was use of line work that felt unnecessary, making clothes look less like they have creases or wrinkles, and more like they have cracks, like granite. The art was better in some areas, some shots, than with others, but the action was still really good. Though, as you can see, I should be careful about how much I criticize artwork. There have been plenty of examples of criminal characters carrying their own stories, like The Sopranos, The Godfather, The Italian Job, but I just don't get the appeal of Jackie Estacado. He seems more like a smug creep who has one thing that makes him slightly interesting, and that interest didn't really shine here. His one redeeming act was ensuring that a pregnant woman and her friend are protected from the unexpected violence that shows up for him. Though we don't really get to know Danielle at all either, other than, for some reason, the Witchblade leaves her clothes on. Though it did the same for Huntress and Wonder Woman, so maybe it's more choosy about who it makes look all fan-servicey. The more I thought about this story, and the more I looked for information on the Firstborn story arc, something became apparent. This comic was kind of pointless as a crossover. From what I can tell so far, without actually reading it, Firstborn doesn't involve any Marvel characters, let alone the ones we see here. I mean, there was a Hulk and Darkness crossover before this, but we get no context for the crime that Matt Murdock defended Jackie from. If it's something that happened in a Darkness comic, and they decided that he'd be found not guilty here, I have no idea. Doctor Strange shows up to be ominous and muddle with his friend's memories, but that's about it. This is setting up a pretty top Cow-centric story, so I don't know why they decided to have this intermission with another company's characters. And I did mention before about connective similarities between characters and crossovers. Witchblade and Darkness, they have a mystical angle, so you could say that at least Doctor Strange fits, and to a degree so does Ghost Rider. And maybe the Hulk, because he's a primal force of nature in his own right, much like the Angelus and the Darkness. I'll grant that those connections are kind of tenuous, and on top of everything, it just leads into an event that has nothing to do with the Marvel characters. If nothing else, it was short and sweet, but oddly felt like a pit stop in Marvel's neighborhood for a bigger story in a different state. It's not badly written, if you ask me, but unless you're invested in either Darkness or Witchblade, you may not get much from this. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.